Welcome back, everybody, to Love Meets Literature. Sorry we missed you last week. I was on my deathbed. No, seriously, I was not, but not feeling well, couldn't record. But here we are now with episode 13. Super excited to be back chatting about some books today. But before we begin, I'm your host, Rachel, and you can find me on Instagram at Paperbacks and Sketchbooks.
And I am your other host, Joe, and you can find us at Love Meets Literature.
Please do give us a follow. It will help us immensely. So, how's it going? It's been such a long time. I mean, it was only a week off, but it feels like forever.
It did. It felt very weird not to record when we normally would have.
It was odd, but we're back today, and today's episode is going to be all about thrillers because, hello, 13th episode. 13 is usually one of those superstitious numbers.
The scary number.
It's the scary number. So what could be more fitting than thrillers?
It's so much fun. I love the concept of like superstitions around a number, especially. Like in a lot of cultures, they avoid, in America, 13 is the big one. So they avoid putting like floor number 13, or they avoid putting room number 13. In, I believe it's Japan, the number 4 is often a superstitious omen. I think it's number 4. And they do things like that over there too, which I think is just super interesting. A bunch of different cultures always have their number that they try to avoid.
And for some reason, ours is 13, which is just very random.
I wonder if it has to do with the movies or if there was something first and then came along like Friday the 13th movie.
I mean, with the way our country is, I wouldn't be surprised if it was something fabricated by Hollywood.
I want to look it up. I really want to know now. According to a single Google search, take that with a grain of salt. In Norse mythology, the god Loki was the 13th to arrive at a feast in Valhalla, where he tricked another attendee into killing the god Balder. Oh, in Christianity, Judas was the 13th guest at the Last Supper.
Okay, so 13, I guess, is just an inherently bad number because people associated with the number 13 end up being evil. Is that what it is?
Pretty much. And I believe the number 4 wasn't Japanese, it was Chinese, according to, again, a single Google search. Because if you add up the numbers 1 and 3, the number 4 sounds like the word death. Wait, hold on. This Google search does not sound legitimate.
Well, the number 4 might sound like the word death in their language.
Well, I know, but why is 13 unlucky? Oh, I guess they're saying 13 and the number 4 is unlucky because if you add the numbers.
Yeah.
Man, that's got to be confusing. Any number that adds up to 4, you got to avoid?
I mean, there's only so many numbers that add up to the number 4 when you put them together.
I know, but that's like 22, 13, 31, 40.
I guess so.
Anyway, enough about numbers.
So, what have you been reading for the past week?
Not only did I start reading, but I also finished Percy Jackson, The Lightning Thief, in the span of our short little break.
That was fast.
It was extremely fast, especially for me. And it was just very good. I forgot how much I liked the Percy Jackson series, especially the first one. I also forgot how different it was from the movie.
Yeah, the movie's like really not that good.
Yeah, a lot of people hated on the movie. I don't know if I hate it. I'm assuming if I watched it now, I probably wouldn't like it as much. But back when I originally watched it, when it first came out, I really enjoyed it. But I think that was the first time that I had ever seen a book become a movie. So I was just like excited because I was like, oh man, this is cool.
Well, I'm pretty sure the Lightning Thief movie is on Hulu, so you can always watch it again.
I could see how I feel about it now. But there is so many things that are completely different than the movie. And it was kind of refreshing because a lot of my memory is actually based off the movie. Because when I read the books originally was way back in like 5th grade. So I didn't remember them very well, or at least the first one very well. So I'm very excited to then dive into the rest of them. Oh, I also started ACOTAR.
Oh, yes, you did. I was wondering if you were going to mention that.
The more important book of the two, you would say.
That's the one that gets me excited
Yeah,
because not many men read ACOTAR because they just think it's for girls. It's a girly book.
that's true. I think there is definitely a stigma towards a girly book, but I decided to finally read it. I found out my really good friend Alex is also or has already read ACOTAR, and he's working on the next one. I think he's in the second book, I believe.
I know, I'm pretty sure he finished the series.
Oh, did he?
Yeah. But the series isn't finished yet. Sarah J. Maas did confirm that she's working on a sixth ACOTAR novel. And I'm just really curious about what the story's going to be. Because when you read the first three, like you kind of feel like it's done. But then there's a fourth mini book that's kind of a transition between the third and the fifth. And then you have the fifth book, which is huge. It's like over 800 pages long and it's about a certain character. I'm not going to say it because I don't want to spoil anything for you. But I just think it was interesting that she chose to keep going after the third book because it did kind of feel done to me. But people wanted more, so she gave us more. And I'm not mad about it because anything she writes, honestly, I will read.
That's fair. There's a lot of times I feel like authors get to where they originally wanted to stop their story, and then it turns out that either maybe they've got, some pressure from the audience, or they just find an amazing idea or something and just run with it. I know the big one, you might not know this, but Dragon Ball Z, which is an anime, it was also, or is also a manga, that was originally supposed to stop after like the first arc, basically, or the second arc, I mean. And then they went on to make years and years of show because of how much people loved it.
So I'm excited for you to keep diving into ACOTAR because I just really want to know your thoughts and your perspective on certain happenings. It's hard not to spoil anything because I've read it twice now, so everything is like really fresh in my head.
Yeah.
But I mean, obviously, there's like a walking red flag, and I just really want your opinion on him.
So for reference, I'm only like 7 chapters in right now, so I'm very, very early. And I'm trying to reserve judgment. I've been judging it really hard in my head, and I'm trying not to, especially because what I've been fed is like all the content online, which really only talk about the spicy parts of the books. So I'm trying to like pull that back, reserve judgment, and I guess I'll give you an update once I get further.
All right, then, I'll be waiting.
So what have you been reading?
Well, I just finished up Funny Story by Emily Henry a couple days ago, and that one was really good. It was the book about the girl who went to live with her ex-fiance's new fiance's ex-boyfriend.
Right. That one.
That one. And it was actually really good. It exceeded my expectations. There were some, like, I had like one teeny tiny little issue with it, and it's that in the synopsis, they made it sound like the fake dating trope was going to be sort of front and center because she was posting this. Okay, this is literally in the synopsis, so it's not a spoiler. She and Daphne, the main character, Daphne, she and Miles, who is the guy that she's now roommates with,
Right.
decided to post misleading photos online so their exes would think that they were dating. That's in the synopsis. It's not a spoiler. So I was under the impression that that was going to be bigger in the story, but it was kind of confusing with how it was because they didn't keep the story straight for everyone. Like certain people, they were like, nah, we're not really dating. But then to other people, they were like, yeah, we're dating. So I was like, as a reader, I was confused. I was like, what is it? What is the story? Are you dating? Are you not dating? What is it?
Yeah, that sounds very hard to keep up with.
You would have been confused. I was confused. But eventually I caught on, and maybe it's because I didn't read for a whole day, so I maybe forgot. There's gaps in my memory. I don't know. But it just felt like information was missing on that. Overall, it was good. I gave it 4.5 stars. I thought it was funny. I mean, it was your average rom-com. I wasn't like laughing out loud at this one like I have with other rom-coms, but it was still good. I liked the characters. The side characters in this book were amazing. I loved all of them. Side characters can make or break your story. You have to have good, strong side characters.
Yeah, I agree.
So, Funny Story by Emily Henry, very solid read. I don't know if I would say it's my favorite Emily Henry book. I think my favorite Emily Henry is Happy Place. That one was more friendship based. The romance was kind of like on the side because it was more of a second chance romance kind of book. That one was just more about a group of friends getting together at this cottage in Maine. And I loved the setting. I want to go to Maine.
I know you do.
Anything with the setting of Maine, I just gravitate towards, and I really don't know why.
You always talk about wanting to go to Maine, and I'm just like, it's such an odd place to really want to go.
But I think it's because I've read so many books that take place in Maine that now I have to go to Maine.
It's like become more appealing, I guess. That makes sense.
I don't know if books romanticize Maine and make it seem better than it is, but it just seems like a very, very relaxing, beautiful place to go. It's like seaside. It's all the way up there towards Canada.
All the way up there. I mean, it is all the way up there. It's at the very top, I believe.
Honestly, it's farther than Niagara Falls, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely not counting Alaska. I'm nearly positive it's the farthest north you can get.
No, you can go farther north than Maine.
Where?
If you look at a map, there's still all of Canada.
I mean, in the United States, obviously Canada is north of Maine. Maine isn't like the North Pole. It's not like the very top.
Well, that's what you were making it sound like.
All
okay.
right, I apologize. Should clarify my words next time.
Okay, so yes, I want to go to the farthest north state, which is Maine.
According to thoughtco.com, the northmost state is actually Minnesota.
I forgot about Minnesota.
Does it really peak higher? Man.
Minnesota has that like little like hat on it that like goes kind of into Canada.
Oh, yeah, that little nub that sticks up. I forgot about that little nub.
But Funny Story took place in Michigan, and it was a small Lake Michigan type of town. So that was more of a familiar setting to me. But Emily Henry just does this thing with all the settings in her books that she makes you want to go there. So now I feel like I need to spend a whole summer living in a town on Lake Michigan so I can experience lake life.
You can insert yourself into the novel a little bit.
Yes, I feel like I have to. She made it sound so nice, like walking distance from everywhere, walking distance to a library, a coffee shop, the lake, a beach. Like, it just sounded so nice.
I think you just want to live in a walkable area.
I think I want to live in a walkable area, and I want to live by water or close enough to water.
I was going to say that limits a lot of your options, but there are quite a few states that are on water. It's also like lakes and stuff too.
Yes, I don't need to live on the ocean. But anyway, Funny Story, solid read, 4.5 stars for me. And I think there's still one Emily Henry book I have left to read, which is People We Meet on Vacation, which I actually have on my shelf. So if I stop checking out library books, I will eventually get to it.
One day, it might happen.
One day it might happen. We'll see. As I mentioned, episode 13, we'll be chatting about some thrillers. I will be bringing 3 thrillers that I've read and rated 5 stars, and I'm very excited to kind of rehash them. It's been a while since I've read some of my picks, and I feel like it'll be a great refresher, remind me why I love thrillers, because I haven't read a good thriller in a very, very long time. So this episode needs to get me excited about thrillers and scary things again. And then, are you bringing thrillers that you've read, thrillers that you want to read?
These are all thrillers that I have added to my TBR.
How exciting.
So we've got a little bit of the past and a little bit of the future.
I guess so, yeah. But thrillers are great. I feel like there's so many different types. Like you have your popcorn thrillers, which are fast-paced, don't really make a whole lot of sense type of thrillers. They're just meant to have like twists and turns like every other page. And they're fun, honestly, when you're in a reading slump. I know Frida McFadden, she's a big popcorn thriller writer who has most of hers on Kindle Unlimited. I haven't read one of hers in a really long time. Her last few honestly have fallen flat for me, which is probably why, but she has a couple good ones. And then there's also like thriller suspense where you're like on the edge of your seat the whole time, just like you holding onto the couch cushions. You're like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next? There's police procedural type of thrillers where you get the whole case like Criminal Minds. There's a whole bunch. And I feel like we've got a good variety that we're going to be chatting about today. But before we dive into our long talk about thrillers, there's just something about the number 13 that reminds me of fall. I don't know why. It might be because usually Friday the 13th falls in the fall area. For example, this year, Friday the 13th is coming up in September. So, September, fall.
Well, I think it's also because of the movies, right? It always makes me think of Halloween, which makes me think of October, which makes me think of fall.
Yes, yes. So I have to know, what's your favorite thing about fall?
That's a tough question. There's a lot of good things. I think I'm gonna have to say sweaters. I really like wearing sweaters. You can just wear them, especially like when it's a little chilly in the house. You can open up the windows and cool it down and then put on a sweater, which seems a little backwards, but it's just so comfortable for some reason.
I can't wait for sweater weather. It's been way too hot and humid. I step outside and it feels like I'm stepping into a sauna.
Right, you just get drenched immediately.
Okay, I agree. Sweaters, very fall vibes. I love blankets. I like opening all the windows and making it kind of cold in here. Not too cold, maybe making it like 50, 60 degrees in here.
Pretty cold, but...
And then piling on all the blankets and the sweatshirts and just being comfy cozy.
Yeah, I
My
agree.
favorite thing is also all of the hot coffees that I can drink. I don't like drinking hot coffee really in the summer because it's already hot and I feel like summer is just iced coffee vibes.
Right. Yeah.
Even though in the fall I also enjoy an iced coffee. I drink iced coffee all year round, honestly. But hot coffee is just so much more fun in the fall.
Yeah, because otherwise it's like hot outside and then it's like hot on your hands and then, because when you take a sip, it like warms up your chest a little bit and then you're like, why am I doing this? It's 95 degrees outside. But during the nice cold months or the chilly months, it's amazing.
Yes, I'm trying to manifest an early fall. I just want it already. It's too hot. I'm hot all the time. Can't cool down. Or the AC is running all the time and it gets to feeling like an ice box in here and then I'm too cold. But then you put a blanket on and you're too hot and it's like, okay, this is miserable.
Well, we're in that really awful period or that awful time of winter, or I'm sorry, that awful time of summer.
I wish it was winter right now.
Where when the AC is on, it's like almost a little too cold, but then as soon as it kicks off, it's like all of a sudden super warm.
It's too hot and it's too humid and it's just, I think it's the region where we live. If we didn't live here, our lives would be better.
Well, yeah. I think you're right.
So there's a lot of great things about fall. Sweaters, blankets, hot coffee, the colors of the trees.
What I'm also realizing is that we like chilly weather, which is kind of interesting.
But I like not a super chilly weather.
40s, 50s kind of areas, typically pretty nice.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think there's really a place where it just stays that temperature all year round.
I would move there if that did. You know how nice that is?
So while we're here dreaming about fall, let's dive into some thrillers. So the first thriller that I am very, very excited to spotlight is Pretend You Don't See Her by Mary Higgins Clark. And this one is more of a mystery thriller. Mary Higgins Clark is dubbed the Queen of Suspense. She writes very suspenseful novels, suspenseful mysteries. And I remember I read this entire book in one day. That's how good it was. I couldn't put it down. It was amazing. So Pretend You Don't See Her is about Lacey Farrell, and she is a rising star on the Manhattan real estate scene and is witness to a murder and to the final words of the victim. The dying woman is convinced her attacker was after her dead daughter's journal, which Lacey gives to the police, but not before making a copy for herself. It's an impulse that later proves nearly fatal. Placed in witness protection and sent to live in Minneapolis, Lacey must assume a fake identity, at least until the killer can be brought to trial. There, she meets Tom Lynch, a radio talk show host whom she begins to date, until the strain of her deception makes her break it off. Then she discovers the killer has traced her whereabouts. Armed with nothing more than her own courage and clues from the journal, Lacey heads back to New York determined to uncover who is behind the deaths of the two women before she is the next casualty.
This sounds very, very thrillery and suspenseful.
Yes, and it delivered, let me tell you. So obviously I gave this book 5 stars. If I could have given it 10 stars, I would have, but alas, Goodreads only lets you do 5. So 5 stars. Like I said, I couldn't put it down. The plot was so good, so well developed. The way it was written, it made so much sense, and it kept you guessing. There were so many red herrings, and like when you thought it was going to go one way, it went the completely opposite direction. And it was so good. It kept me on my toes, and I love that in a thriller. And the characters were also really well developed. I feel like sometimes in a thriller, you get really shallow characters because it focuses much more on the bad things that are happening. But this one, I got to know a lot about Lacey, a lot about her boyfriend that, she met in Witsec. I liked that it had multiple points of view. So this book had a point of view from Lacey, obviously, and it had a point of view from the bad guy, and it had points of views from pretty much every character. So it sounds like a lot, but it actually worked for the story because the points of view from the other characters was more of like gearing up towards the reader finding out who the bad guy is. So like you're kind of like thinking all of these characters could potentially be the bad guy, but really only one of those points of view was the bad guy.
Gotcha. It's almost kind of like a Clue type read to it.
Yeah, kind of. But it was really good. I loved how it was laid out. There was so much depth to the story, so fast paced. Obviously, I read it in one day, but highly recommend. 5-star thriller in my opinion. But again, Mary Higgins Clark can do no wrong. That was Pretend You Don't See Her by Mary Higgins Clark. And what do you have to bring to the table?
So the first book that I've got is on my TBR, and it's like one of probably the very next books that I'm going to read, very high up on the list at least. This is the second one of the Victor the Assassin series, and this does have slight spoilers. So if you have not read the first one and you're looking to, close your ears real quick. The Hired Killer. Victor, a former assassin for hire who has joined forces with a CIA special unit. His first assignment, 3 strangers, 3 hits, fast and clean. Victor's a natural for this. The Shadow Conspiracy. It should have been simple, but with each hit, Victor is plunged deeper into an unimaginable conspiracy where no one, at least of all the people he knows, can be trusted. The Triple Cross you won't see coming. With the stakes growing higher by the minute, Victor realizes he's been forced into playing a game he never expected because he's the next target, and there's no way out. This one seems more suspenseful than the first book in the series. The first one is labeled as a thriller, and I definitely would say it is. You do get a lot of that, not really going to know what's going to happen next, but it's much more action focused. So it's not sort of that slow detective burn. It's very much like, every scene, every chapter, something is happening.
Yeah, thrillers can have action. I don't mind action in my thrillers. It kind of keeps it interesting.
Yeah, it adds, a little bit of a layer to it. So very excited to read this one. And this is The Enemy by Tom Wood.
Another thriller I've got is Before She Disappeared by Lisa Gardner. This one is more of an amateur detective type of thriller. So again, very good. I love amateur detective novels. Amateur detective, in case you're unfamiliar, it basically means someone who is not law enforcement, who has never participated in law enforcement in any way, decides to investigate a crime by themselves.
Kind of like Nancy Drew.
Yes, but more sophisticated.
Right. Little more higher level, so to speak.
Not teenagers investigating crimes.
Right. Yeah.
So Before She Disappeared is actually the first book in the Frankie Elkin series, Frankie Elkin being our main character. So Frankie is an average middle-aged woman. She's a recovering alcoholic with more regrets than belongings. But she spends her life doing what no one else will, searching for missing people the world has stopped looking for. A new case brings her to Mattapan, a rough Boston neighborhood. She is searching for Angelique Badeau, a Haitian teenager who vanished from her high school months earlier. Resistance from the Boston PD and the victim's wary family tells Frankie she's on her own, and she soon learns she's asking questions someone doesn't want answered. But Frankie will stop at nothing to discover the truth, even if it means the next person to go missing could be her. Obviously, again, 5 stars. Absolutely loved it. I love amateur detective. Frankie was such a likable character. She wasn't just surface level. Like, we got to learn about her alcoholism, her relationships, how she sort of ended up with no belongings and just traveling the world. And we learn this really dark part of her backstory that really helps the reader understand why Frankie is the way she is.
I like that. Helps you understand like sort of her motivations.
Yes. So I really liked that. So A+ for character building. And the way Frankie conducted her investigation into Angelique Badeau's disappearance was also super interesting because she was sort of working with the Boston Police Department, but sort of not, but sort of was. It was kind of ambiguous what her standing with them was. They kept warning her, like, don't do it. But she was like, I'm going to do it anyway because that's what she does. She was running the show, and she basically, spoiler, close your ears if you're going to read this. She basically solved the crime for the police department.
Interesting.
Yes, but that's what Frankie Elkin does. She solves things for law enforcement. She goes and searches for people that law enforcement has stopped searching for, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, those cold cases, I believe is what they call it.
Yes. So obviously with any thriller, there are some parts that are just not believable at all. But I could look past it in this book because everything else was done so well. And also, this wasn't a police procedural at all. It's amateur sleuth. Amateur sleuth is different than police procedural.
Right.
So all rules go out the window with that. But this one, again, lots of red herrings. I kind of felt like I could know who done it, but I wasn't confident in my guess. And the very end, my mind was blown. So it went a completely different direction than what I was thinking anyway.
Well, I think then it did its job, right, of subverting the expectation.
It did do its job. So I actually wrote in my review that reading this book felt like running a marathon. And it did, because I literally was like flipping page after page after page, didn't want to put it down. And I don't think I did put it down for a really long time. And it was amazing. And I'm hoping she releases more Frankie Elkin books very soon, because her most recent Frankie Elkin book was not the best. So I just want her to get back to the original Frankie Elkin story layout and make it like how Before She Disappeared was, because it was amazing. It had action in it. Action was really good.
I wonder how many crimes you have to solve as an amateur until you become like police procedural. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, her whole thing was that she had done it before, and people would actually reach out to her saying, so-and-so's missing, can't find them, police have stopped looking.
Oh, so she's kind of like a private investigator almost, a little bit.
But not licensed.
More like a enthusiastic investigator.
She's more of that person who's on chat forums, like searching for things. Like, she doesn't own anything. She's a nomad. She doesn't have a permanent home because all she does is travel the country solving these cases. And she'll actually go to public libraries and go on chat forums and see who's missing, who needs help. She's kind of like that. She's like kind of crazy, but also
a little bit, yeah. But I mean, she helps people, so if you're a little crazy but you help people, I think that's okay.
Yeah, so it's good. I really love Frankie Elkin as a character, and I love the books. That was Before She Disappeared by Lisa Gardner.
All right, the next one on my list is The Outlands by Tyler Edwards. And this is the first one in the Outlands saga. I guess there's 3 books right now. There may be more, though. In the ruins of the world that lies with the city of Dios, a haven protected from the hostile environment known as the Outlands, ruled by an oppressive patriarch, The people of Dios are conditioned in fear. The smallest infraction could result in banishment to the outlands, a fate worse than death. With his makeshift family of undesirables, Jet Lasting struggles to find his place in the world, where drawing attention to yourself can get you killed. His very existence is considered a crime. To survive, he must avoid guards, beggar gangs, and an ever-growing tension that could drag the whole city into chaos. Jet unwittingly becomes entwined in a plot to overthrow the government, where his choices could lead freedom or the death of everyone he's ever known or cared about. What drew me into this is that sort of a little bit of a dystopian style thriller, and the fact that it didn't quite seem like a sci-fi or a fantasy. I couldn't really tell. It kind of hangs in the middle, but I had never really heard of the idea of a dystopian thriller, and that's what the vibes of this really gave me.
I mean, any book can be a thriller if you include scary things.
Well, I guess that's true. This was a young adult, or at least it was marked as young adult. So this could be a little bit, I'm assuming it's not going to have like very intense themes, but I'm not sure. It's on the TBR, so I guess we'll see.
Well, you have to read it and let us know how it is.
And that was The Outlands by Tyler Edwards.
The final thriller I have to bring to the table today is No One Can Know by Kate Alice Marshall. This one I read at the beginning of this year, and I just remember it was one that I also could not put down, which was surprising because I actually did not really enjoy Kate Alice Marshall's adult debut, which was What Lies in the Woods. I actually gave What Lies in the Woods, I think 3 or 3.5 stars. I just wasn't vibing with it. So I was hesitant to pick up No One Can Know. But I'm so glad I did. And I'm so glad I gave Kate Alice Marshall a second chance because I loved it so much. Emma hasn't told her husband much about her past. He knows her parents are dead and she hasn't spoken to her sisters in years. Then they lose their apartment, her husband gets laid off, and Emma discovers she's pregnant, right as the bank account slips into the red. That's when Emma confesses that she has one more asset, her parents' house, which she owns jointly with her estranged sisters. They can't sell it, but they can live in it. But returning home means that Emma is forced to reveal her secrets to her husband, that the house is not a rundown farmhouse, but a stately mansion, and that her parents died there, were murdered, and that some people say Emma did it. Emma and her sisters have never spoken about what really happened that night. Now, her return to the house may lure her sisters back, but it will also crack open family and small town secrets lots of other people don't want revealed. As Emma struggles to reconnect with her old family and hold together her new one, she begins to realize that the things they have left unspoken all these years have put them in danger again. So this book, again, 5 stars. All of them were 5 stars today. I loved this book. I think this was an excellent example of what happens when authors just keep pushing themselves to write. Because like I said, I was not a fan of her first adult thriller, but this second one of hers was so much better than the first one. And it just goes to show that sometimes you need to give authors a second chance, especially when it's a debut versus like a second book, because their writing can grow so much, story development, all that jazz. But this one was really good. It kept me guessing. Again, I kind of had an inkling of who done it, but again, so many red herrings that I wasn't sure. And it did keep me on the edge of my seat. And the ending was so action-packed and kind of ridiculous, but also I kind of loved it, that the 5 stars was sealed for me in the ending alone.
Wow, that's high praise for an ending.
Yes. And I also, again, liked that this book had multiple points of view. So we did get a point of view from each of the sisters that are mentioned in the synopsis. There was a sufficient amount of backstory for each of them that I knew about them and I could sort of understand them. Obviously, when you have multiple points of view, though, you do have a favorite point of view.
Right.
So there was always that one point of view where I wanted to know more, but I didn't get more, but I just have to live with it. But again, this was great. It's what you call a domestic thriller because it deals with family drama, and there's usually murder involved in a domestic thriller.
Interesting. I didn't know that that was a classification.
When you live on Bookstagram, you start to learn that there are so many different types of so many different genres. It's amazing how many there are. I was being taken in circles with this one, and the ending, amazing. 5 stars, loved it. No One Can Know by Kate Alice Marshall. This was actually a super hyped up book earlier in the year as well, which is also what made me skeptical to pick it up. So if anyone has been seeing this everywhere and has no idea if they're going to like it because it is super hyped, I just got to tell you the hype is worth it. Even if there is like one or two teensy tiny ridiculous things, it doesn't matter because the ending is going to make it worth it.
Well, there you go. High praise.
Yes, that's very high praise coming from me.
The next book on my list is actually one that I'm extremely interested in and has very quickly moved to the top of my TBR. This one is called Midnight Water City by Chris McKinney. This is also the first in a trilogy called the Water City Trilogy. The year is 2150. An unnamed police detective receives a message from Akira Kurama, the preeminent scientist and living legend who vanquished a world-ending meteor 30 years ago. As Akira's former head of security and perhaps her only friend, he is one of the few who knows of the sacrifices that were necessary for her to complete Ascalon, the cosmic ray that neutralized the global threat. Ascalon's scar remains in the sky, a permanent reminder of humanity's close call with extinction. When he arrives at Akira's home and finds her methodically dismembered, he must dig into their shared past with the help of a mysterious synesthesia no one else knows he has to find her killer. Through a future of underwater cities, floating suburbs, skin-dyed teenagers, and a wealth gap that has outlived the near apocalypse, McKinney's cinematic novel is the perfect blend of dark cyberpunk and thrilling detective procedural, all while posing the ultimate question of what we are willing to sacrifice to engineer the world we want.
So, what is cyberpunk?
Cyberpunk is futuristic, but typically it's also like a world of dystopia. It's often that like people have cool cybernetic enhancements. So it's usually people have like almost cyborg like arms and limbs, or they have neural implants that allow them to like make phone calls in their head and all that kind of stuff. It's typically just like imagine what people always thought the future would look like and then dial it to 11 is kind of what cyberpunk is.
Interesting. I've always seen that term around, but I've never bothered looking up what it was.
Yeah, it's definitely very intense. Always like neon lights is very much associated with it, like neon everything, nightlife 100% of the time. Again, typically very big dystopian where there's some big entity or corporation or people that you're rebelling against is the punk part typically.
Interesting. When I think of dystopian, for some reason, my brain always pictures like barren lands with like nothing left. And I think it might be because my first foray into dystopian novels was Divergent. And that's very like apocalyptic kind of thing.
That's so interesting. I always think of the exact opposite of that. I always picture like sort of like a slum city with like a backdrop of like an amazing, beautiful infrastructure. And so it's always got that sort of class gap. But my first or like hard set memory of dystopian sort of cyberpunk kind of like that is actually the movie District 9, which was like aliens and sci-fi, but they had very much that. It was like big dystopian.
Yeah, I've not ventured too far into dystopian things. The really only image of a dystopia that I have in my head is from what I've read and seen in the Divergent books and movies.
Very interesting. I also have always thought of Maze Runner too.
I've never seen Maze Runner.
Really? It's a book too, I believe.
Never read the book either.
I've heard they're really good.
I've also heard they're really good, but when they were really popular, I was not into that stuff. So the chances of me picking that up were zero, non existent.
I also really like this book, or the idea of this book, because it talks about the word that I struggle to pronounce, which is synesthesia, which is the condition, I guess you would call it. So the actual definition is the production of a sense impression relating to one sense or part of the body by stimulation of another sense or part of the body.
I don't understand how that works.
I don't either. It's like you would smell sight or you would see what you're hearing, I guess, is
I
kind of how I
know
understand it.
I know one of the most common forms of synesthesia, I believe, is associating colors with letters or colors with words.
Oh, interesting.
Actually, I'm pretty sure there was a girl I went to high school with who had that form of synesthesia.
Very interesting. I'm also reading here that one of the experiences that you can have is seeing music as color.
Yes, a lot of people have that kind too.
That's super cool.
I know, and I was always so confused by it because I was like, how do you associate colors with sounds or colors with words? What color would I be?
Right. Yeah, like it's so interesting. I it's one of those things that I truly just can't fathom, but I'm very interested on what they would do with that in terms of the book then. So that seems super cool.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how his synesthesia plays a part in like rescuing her or not rescuing her, finding her killer.
Yeah, she's already dismembered, so
Yeah, unfortunately.
a little late to the draw on that one.
Well, if only his synesthesia could bring her back to life.
This is so I'm now on the Wikipedia page for it and it's so interesting. I strongly recommend taking a read of this.
I'm not a sciencey person, so all of it's just going to fly over my head and I'm not going to understand any of it. But for the people that do have synesthesia, I bet it's really cool.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it'd be like inconvenient or annoying or if it would be like almost like a superpower. I mean, the book kind of portrays it as a pseudo superpower almost, but I'm curious if maybe in there they talk about like the difficulties of it.
Well, you're going to have to read it and find out.
I guess so.
So, we had a bunch of really interesting sounding thrillers today, and hopefully, you think some of them are worth reading because thrillers can be fun. I know there's a lot of people out there who don't read thrillers, but I feel like after you read the right thriller for you, you are easily turned on to the genre and you just want to read all of them.
I could definitely see that. Yeah.
They're so addictive. Like after I read a really good one, all I want to do is keep reading thrillers until I read a really bad one. And then I steer towards a different genre for a while.
I mean, I never was really pulled to these kinds of books, but then I read the first Victor the Assassin, which was a thriller, and I absolutely loved it. And now I'm reading all these and I'm like, man, I want to read all of these, including the ones that you mentioned too. I'm like, man, those look really good too.
Yes. And I mean, I could have brought some scarier ones, but
Save that for the Halloween episode.
I guess so. But I don't really read a lot of horror. I really only read thrillers. Most of the thrillers I read though take place around serial killers, which I guess some people could say is scarier than horror elements.
Yeah, I definitely could see the argument either way because horror is like fictional almost. Like,
Horror to me is more creepy.
yeah,
Things just give you the creeps with horror. For thrillers, I think of more actual things that could, for real, be scary.
right. Like actually happen in the
Yeah.
real world.
Yes. Horror, I think of more not paranormal, but more like supernatural happenings or
Yeah.
things that aren't necessarily real or people just in their own heads thinking something is real. And it just gives it this like all around creep factor. Now, obviously, murder can happen in horror novels.
Well, yes.
It does happen in horror novels. So, I mean, obviously, blood and gore and killing is just common in all of them. But there's just something about horror that has more of a creep factor to me than thrillers do.
Well, I think it's like, weirdly enough, the thrillers you can almost sort of calm yourself because it's so realistic that you can be like, oh, well, I just wouldn't have put myself in this situation. Because normally, a lot of times when somebody is in a situation like that, it's because of like maybe they're not that great of a person, they've done some questionable things, or maybe they're like a police officer, so they put themselves in those positions on purpose. And so you're just like, oh, I just wouldn't go into the creepy building. But horror, I feel like gets thrown on people a lot. It's like you've bought a
Yeah.
house and then all of a sudden it's possessed and now demons are after you or something. You know, obviously crude example, but I feel like you're typically thrown into a horror as where a thriller sort of progresses and happens.
Yeah, I can see that. I haven't read a lot of horror, so it's definitely a genre I want to read more of so I can better compare the two. But they're fairly similar in a sense.
Two sides of the same coin for sure.
But it's funny because I can read like all of these books, but if they were movies, I don't think I'd be able to watch them.
Oh no, horror movies are my least favorite type of movie. I've watched a ton of them, but I've never enjoyed myself. Same thing with like thriller movies or suspenseful movies. I typically don't like those that much either, but I have watched a ton of them.
I'm just not a movie watcher, as we all know.
Yeah, I know.
So that was a lot of book talk. What are you obsessed with this week?
I feel like my obsessions haven't changed this week from last week or the week before. I'm really into golf. I haven't gone back to the driving range yet, but I do want to go back. I've been thinking about it.
It's too hot out.
Yeah, it's been really hot and then all of a sudden it like randomly rains lately, so
Yeah.
trying to avoid that. Yeah, I don't think there's anything new to add. I think I'm pretty same old this week.
Boring.
What about you? What are you obsessed with
Oh,
this
you
week?
know what I'm obsessed with. I'm obsessed with Dreamlight Valley.
Yeah, I know.
It's all I want to do. I've progressed from Animal Crossing to Dreamlight Valley. So, Dreamlight Valley, you can play it on like all the gaming platforms. It's made in collaboration with Disney, so it is a Disney themed game. I kind of think of it as an Animal Crossing, but your villagers are Disney characters. And there's this like whole story to it, and you go on quests and do things. It's not like Animal Crossing where there's like no story, you just do whatever you want. This has a story and it's really good, and you're kind of like trying to rebuild the valley, and it's really fun. And all I want to do is, mine for gems and dig up shiny objects and go fishing and talk to Donald Duck.
Do you find it more like resource and crafty heavy compared to Animal Crossing?
Yeah, because for all my stupid quests, I have to go hunt for these things that are like impossible to find, or like I could be mining for like 2 hours and still not have enough emeralds I need for some project that Merlin wants me to do.
Because I've never played it. I've only, seen you play it. So it seems from an outside perspective, Animal Crossing is a lot more of like, you can find an item in like a box or something, as where Dreamlight Valley, I feel like you've crafted or you have to make like everything.
Yes. So I do have to make most of my furniture and most of the decorations for the valley. It's not like Animal Crossing where I can just go to Tom Nook's and buy
Right. Yeah.
the furniture. I have to actually craft it. Now, Animal Crossing does have furniture that you can craft as well, but they're like, you don't have to. Like, you can still have a fully decorated island without crafted furniture.
Right.
But Dreamlight Valley, I'm finding that if I want specific things, I need to make them,
Yeah, I could see that for sure.
which makes it very difficult for me to decorate my valley right now because I'm still trying to rebuild it. Like, I haven't unlocked everything in the game yet. So I feel like I'm just going to go through the story and, in between try and slowly make it pretty.
Make it up to level, up to par.
Well, for what I like. I
Right.
mean, Animal Crossing, I'm very specific about how my island looks. Dreamlight Valley, I can't be as particular about it because I don't have the resources to make it how I want it to look. And also, everything costs an ungodly amount of money. So I'm always poor.
Well, I mean, guess it keeps you playing.
It does keep me playing and it does keep it interesting. But sometimes I get stuck on like a portion of a quest and I just Google it. I'm like, I'm not that gamer that can sit there and try and figure it out for hours. I just have to go to Google and be like, where do I find this thing?
If there's anything that I've learned recently is you just got to enjoy the game. So if you get to the point where you're not enjoying it, Google it, look it up, take the cheat code, doesn't matter.
But then I feel stupid because I'm like, it was literally right in front of my face.
Yeah, the amount of times that that's happened to me is like hundreds.
But now all I want to do is play Dreamlight Valley, and my reading has definitely taken a back seat. But also, I think my reading has taken a back seat because I haven't really read a book recently that's like grabbed my attention right off the bat. So I've been sort of slumpy. If you remember our very first episode about reading slumps, I'm trying to do everything I can to get out of the slump. And one of those things is embracing another hobby. So I guess Dreamlight Valley counts as my other hobby. But what happens when all I want to do now is the other hobby?
I guess it's now a gaming podcast.
Oh, man. No, I still love reading though, which brings me into my current read. So this week I'm very excited to be reading Shadowheart by Meg Gardner, no relation to Lisa Gardner. This is the fourth unsub book and it is so good. So the unsub series by Meg Gardner is basically about this FBI profiler who hunts down serial killers. It's Criminal Minds in book form and it's amazing. Like it's written how an episode of Criminal Minds would be written. You have the FBI, you see what they're doing in their office in their investigation. You have the killer committing the crimes. You have the victims like leading up to when they're about to be killed, you know, like just, you know, la 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 in the house doing nothing, watching TV, and then all of a sudden you're dead. That kind of thing. And then you have like witnesses and stuff, their points of view, and it's just so good, so amazing. I loved all of the books in the series, so this one has been very good so far. It's about a copycat killer and it's so good. I can't wait to keep reading. So, you know, maybe this is the book that will get me out of my slump. And how fitting for this episode because it's a thriller.
Yeah. Definitely. I hope it does pull you out.
I hope so too. But what are you working on reading this week?
So I mentioned it in the beginning. I'm working through Aquatar, but I am also starting. I'm but just a couple of weeks delayed. I'm now starting the second Percy Jackson book.
You are now going to be reading Percy Jackson for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, it's so good. And also, Sea of Monsters was ready right away, so I was like, got it.
Sea of Monsters is a good one. It has my favorite character.
Who's your favorite character?
Well, how far are you in it?
I mean, I've read them all before, but
it's my favorite character is Tyson.
I do like Tyson. He's a good character.
He's just so funny. I just imagine this like big old clumsy Cyclops just wandering around and it just makes me laugh.
He's good comic relief, but he's also like a good person.
He's also a baby.
Yeah, I guess in Cyclops years.
In Sea of Monsters, he's like an actual baby Cyclops.
Yeah, isn't the equivalent of like a toddler or something like that, or like a 10-year-old? It's fun.
It is fun, and it just makes me laugh every time he says something. But I love Tyson. I'm not going to say who Tyson is because it's a spoiler, but great character. Great series.
It is a good series. I'm very excited. I can't wait now to like get to the Heroes of Olympus series because I remember those books very vividly because I read them way after the other ones. So now I'm like extremely excited to make my way around to them.
I still haven't read The House of Hades because my Libby hold is still 10 weeks. So I've just been taking a Percy Jackson brain break, I guess, because I have no choice.
Yeah, that's fair.
Hopefully I don't forget everything that happened 10 weeks from now. I might, but once I start reading, maybe I'll remember.
Yeah, I'd like to think so. I'm also on the Kindle binge now, or like I've been reading on my tablet through Kindle. I don't know why all of a sudden that's pulled me in. I feel like I've read physical books or I've preferred physical books for so long, but for some reason now that's just I've got the itch.
I do like reading on my Kindle.
Sometimes it's just so easy.
It is, because you can take it anywhere. I can like lay down in bed and read my Kindle, and it's easier than holding a heavy book in bed trying to read.
I've got a strap for it now too, so I can just, without having to do the pinky thing.
Yeah, you don't got to worry about dropping it either.
Yeah, it's
So
very nice.
that's fun. Well, it looks like we've got some good books that we're reading, great book recommendations. 13th episode. Hopefully, you're not too superstitious. I know I'm not. I don't really believe in that stuff, but I do enjoy Halloween season. It's always fun. I'm ready to go play some Dreamlight Valley.
I think I might go do some reading.
Reading also sounds good. I wish I could do both at the same time, but we've uncovered that I just can't. But anyways, I hope you all found your next scary book to read, and stay cool. It's hot out there these days. Fall will be upon us shortly, and happy reading.